They promised salvation but delivered death. They claimed divine authority but practiced human cruelty. This is the story of history's most dangerous cult leaders, the charismatic monsters who built empires of control, manipulation, and violence. From ancient prophecies to modern tragedies, we're examining 15 figures whose devotion to power left trails of bodies and broken minds. Jim Jones. A preacher's son from Indiana, James Warren Jones starts the People's Temple in 1955 with a message of racial equality and social justice. His early years attract genuine believers seeking community and change. Jones presents himself as a prophet who can heal the sick and see the future. Behind closed doors, he rehearses fake healings using chicken livers as tumors and plants informants to gather personal details about followers. By the 1970s, Jones relocates his congregation to a remote compound in Guyana called Jonestown. He calls it a socialist paradise. In reality, it's a prison. Members work 16-hour days in brutal heat with minimal food. Jones broadcasts his voice through loudspeakers day and night, preaching paranoia about American conspirators. He stages suicide drills he calls white nights, forcing followers to drink what they're told is poison to test their loyalty. When Congressman Leo Ryan visits Jonestown in November 1978 to investigate abuse allegations, several members beg to leave with him. Jones sends armed guards to the airstrip. They open fire, killing Ryan and 4 others. Hours later, Jones orders the final white night. Armed guards surround the pavilion as nurses squirt cyanide-laced flavor aid into children's mouths. Parents follow. Some resist and are shot or injected by force. 909 people die that day, including 304 children. Jones dies from a gunshot wound to the head. Investigators find practice audio tapes labeled "death tape" in his cabin. The phrase, "drinking the Kool-Aid," enters the American lexicon, forever linking blind obedience to this massacre in the jungle. David Koresh. Vernon Wayne Howell grows up in Houston, memorizing the Bible by age 12. He joins the Branch Davidians, a Seventh-day Adventist splinter group, in 1981. By 1990, after a power struggle involving gunfire, he takes control and changes his name to David Koresh, believing himself the final prophet. Koresh preaches that God has granted him alone the right to procreate with all women in the compound, including girls as young as 12. He calls them his spiritual wives. The men, including those already married, must remain celibate. Koresh fathers at least 15 children with various followers. He beats children with wooden paddles and deprives them of food as punishment. Former members report mandatory Bible study sessions lasting 15 hours. The compound near Waco, Texas, becomes an arsenal. Koresh stockpiles illegal weapons, converting semi-automatic rifles to fully automatic. The ATF plans a raid for February 1993. Someone tips off Koresh. When agents arrive, a firefight erupts. 4 agents and 6 Branch Davidians die. The FBI surrounds the compound for 51 days. Negotiations fail repeatedly. The FBI uses psychological warfare, blasting sounds of rabbits being slaughtered and Tibetan monk chants at high volume. On April 19, tanks punch holes in the walls and pump in tear gas. Fire breaks out. Koresh and 75 followers, including 25 children, perish in the flames. Investigators debate whether the fire was mass suicide or accidental. Koresh's body shows a gunshot wound to the forehead, fired at contact range. Charles Manson. Charles Mills Manson spends most of his youth in reformatories and prisons. Released in 1967, he drifts to San Francisco during the Summer of Love. Short, charismatic, and musically ambitious, Manson attracts young runaways and dropouts. He preaches an apocalyptic race war he calls Helter Skelter, named after the Beatles' song he believes contains coded messages meant for him. Manson establishes his family at Spahn Ranch, a decrepit movie set outside Los Angeles. He uses LSD, sleep deprivation, and isolation to break down his followers' identities. Women in the family call him Jesus. Manson never holds a job, but convinces his followers to panhandle, steal, and prostitute themselves for the group. He befriends Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, briefly infiltrating the music industry before burning those bridges with his erratic behavior. In August 1969, Manson decides to trigger helter-skelter himself. He sends followers to kill Sharon Tate, the pregnant wife of director Roman Polanski, along with 4 others at her home. The next night, they murder Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. The killers write messages in blood on the walls. Manson doesn't commit the murders himself, but directs them like a conductor. Police connect the crimes after Susan Atkins brags about them to a cellmate. Manson and 4 followers are convicted in 1971. Manson carves an X into his forehead, later modified to a swastika. He dies in prison in 2017 at age 83, having spent more than half a century behind bars. His family proved loyalty could be weaponized with the right combination of drugs, fear, and delusion. Marshall Applewhite. Marshall Herf Applewhite grows up in Texas, the son of a Presbyterian minister. He serves as a music professor and directs theater productions before a nervous breakdown and divorce shatter his life. In 1972, he meets Bonnie Nettles, a nurse who shares his interest in mysticism. Together they form Heaven's Gate, believing they are the 2 witnesses mentioned in the Book of Revelation. Applewhite and Nettles convince followers that Earth is about to be recycled, and only they know the exit strategy. They claim a UFO will take believers to the next level, a physical place beyond death. Members must shed their human containers through extreme discipline. Heaven's Gate requires celibacy, identical androgynous clothing, and complete renunciation of family ties. Applewhite himself undergoes castration, and 7 male followers do the same. The group survives through web design work in the early internet era, creating surprisingly sophisticated sites. They live communally near San Diego, California, following strict routines. When the Hale-Bopp comet appears in 1997, Applewhite announces the accompanying spacecraft has arrived. The time for exit has come. In March 1997, 39 members die by suicide in 3 waves over 3 days. They ingest phenobarbital mixed with applesauce and vodka, then place plastic bags over their heads. All wear identical black shirts, sweatpants, and new Nike Decade sneakers. Purple shrouds cover their faces. They die in shifts so each wave can clean up after the previous group before taking their own doses. Applewhite dies in the final wave. Investigators find detailed instructions, videotaped goodbyes, and 5 dive bills in each person's pocket for their journey. Shoko Asahara, born Chizuo Matsumoto in 1955. This partially blind son of a poor tatami mat maker attends a school for the blind in Japan. He starts a yoga studio in the 1980s and rebrands himself as Shoko Asahara, claiming supernatural powers. He founds Om Shirikyo in 1984, blending Buddhism, Hinduism, and apocalyptic Christianity. His teachings promise enlightenment, but require absolute obedience. Asahara recruits heavily from Japan's elite universities, attracting scientists and engineers. This proves catastrophic. The cult grows wealthy through computer companies and other businesses its members operate. Asahara preaches that a global apocalypse will occur by 1997, and only Om members will survive. He believes violence is justified to protect the cult and accelerate the prophesied end times. Om Shinrikyo constructs facilities to manufacture weapons of mass destruction. They produce sarin gas, VX nerve agent, and experiment with anthrax and botulinum toxin. In 1994, they test sarin in Matsumoto, killing 8 people. Authorities don't yet connect the attack to Asahara. In March 1995, cult members board 5 Tokyo subway trains during rush hour and puncture bags of liquid sarin with sharpened umbrella tips. 13 people die and thousands are injured in what remains the deadliest terrorist attack on Japanese soil. Police raid armed facilities and find chemical weapons, laboratories, and a Russian military helicopter. Asahara hides in a shipping container at a compound building. Arrested in May 1995, he's convicted on 13 counts of murder. He hangs in 2018 along with 6 followers, ending 23 years on death row. Shinrikyo demonstrated that cults could acquire weapons-grade capabilities when led by someone both messianic and murderous. L. Ron Hubbard. Lafayette Ronald Hubbard writes pulp science fiction in the 1930s and 40s with moderate success. In 1950, he publishes Dianetics, the modern science of mental health, claiming to reveal the source of all psychological problems. The auditing process he describes, which uses an e-meter device to detect engrams or mental scars, becomes the foundation of Scientology, which Hubbard officially establishes as a religion in 1953. Hubbard teaches that humans are immortal spiritual beings called thetans who have lived through multiple past lives. Advanced members eventually learn the story of Xenu, an alien dictator who brought billions of people to Earth 75 million years ago and killed them with hydrogen bombs in volcanoes. The trapped spirits, called body thetans, cause psychological problems in modern humans. Members pay thousands of dollars for courses to progress through levels and remove these spiritual parasites. The organization becomes notorious for aggressive tactics against critics. Hubbard creates the Guardian's Office, an intelligence agency within Scientology that infiltrates government agencies and steals documents. Operation Snow White in the 1970s becomes the largest infiltration of the US government in history, resulting in 11 Scientologists, including Hubbard's wife, going to federal prison. Hubbard himself avoids prosecution by going into hiding. He spends his final years on a ranch in California, isolated and paranoid, communicating only through written notes. He dies in 1986, and the organization announces he has moved on to continue his research on another planet. Scientology continues operating worldwide with celebrity members and sophisticated legal and public relations operations. The organization remains controversial for allegations of abuse, disconnection policies that separate members from critical family, and aggressive litigation against opponents. Joseph D. Mambro and Luc Jurat. The Order of the Solar Temple combines New Age beliefs, Templar mythology, and apocalyptic prophecy. Joseph D. Mambro, a French con artist and former clockmaker, handles business operations. Luc Jurat, a Belgian homeopathic doctor, serves as the charismatic front man. Together they recruit wealthy Europeans with promises of spiritual enlightenment and survival of coming catastrophes. Di Mambro stages elaborate rituals using special effects, holograms, hidden speakers, and theatrical lighting to convince followers they're witnessing genuine miracles. Members pay enormous sums for initiations and advancement. D. Mambro claims his daughter Emmanuel is a cosmic child who will lead humanity. When another member gives birth to a boy in 1994, D. Mambro declares the infant the Antichrist and orders his death. Members stab the 3-month-old child with a wooden stake. In October 1994, fires erupt simultaneously at Solar Temple properties in Switzerland and Quebec. Authorities find 53 bodies. Some are shot, some are poisoned, some are suffocated with plastic bags. The crime scenes are staged to look like ritual suicides, but investigators determine many victims were murdered, including children. Di Mambro and Jurat die in the Swiss fires. The deaths continue. In December 1995, 16 more members die in a forest in France, arranged in a star formation. In March 1997, 5 more members burned to death in Quebec, including 3 children. In total, 74 people die across 3 countries. The Solar Temple proves that apocalyptic beliefs, combined with theatrical manipulation, can create murder, suicide pacts spanning continents. Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, born Chandra Mohan Jain in India in 1931, he later takes the name Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, meaning blessed one, who has recognized himself as God. He teaches a philosophy mixing Eastern mysticism, Western psychology, and sexual liberation. His Pune ashram attracts wealthy Westerners seeking enlightenment through meditation, therapy groups, and Tantra in the 1970s. Rajneesh relocates to Oregon in 1981 after tax troubles in India, purchasing a 64,000-acre ranch. His followers, called Rajneeshis and identified by their orange and red clothing, build an entire city called Rajneeshpuram. Rajneesh owns 93 Rolls-Royces and takes daily drives past his followers who line the roads in silent worship. He stops speaking publicly for 3 years, communicating only through his secretary Maranand Sheila. Conflicts with local Oregonians escalate into bioterrorism. In 1984, followers contaminate salad bars in the Dalles with salmonella, attempting to incapacitate voters before an election. 751 people fall ill in the first and largest bioterror attack in U.S. history. The cult also plots to murder a U.S. attorney, import homeless people to manipulate voter registration, and wiretapped public officials. When authorities investigate, Sheila and several lieutenants flee the country. Rajneesh breaks his silence to denounce them, but investigations reveal his awareness of the crimes. Arrested while attempting to flee on a rented Learjet, Rajneesh pleads guilty to immigration fraud and is deported in 1985. He returns to India, changes his name to Osho, and dies in 1990. Former followers report coercive psychological practices and claim Rajneesh was addicted to nitrous oxide. Orville Luberon. Orville Morel Luberon grows up in a polygamist Mormon fundamentalist family in Mexico. His brother Joel founds the Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Times in 1955, claiming to be the prophet. Orville believes he should lead instead and develops a doctrine called blood atonement. The idea that certain sins require the sinner's death for forgiveness. After Joel refuses to step aside, Orville has him murdered in 1972. He takes control of a splinter group and orders the systematic killing of rival polygamist leaders and defectors from his own church. Orville has at least 13 wives and dozens of children. He treats his family as soldiers and assassins. Those who disobey face beatings or death sentences. Between 1972 and 1981, Orville is connected to more than 25 murders across the United States and Mexico. His followers shoot rival leader Rulon Orid in his office in 1977. They kill 4 people in a machine gun attack on a rival church in 1979. Orville justifies each killing with scripture, writing lengthy theological treatises explaining why blood must be shed. Arrested in 1979, Orville is convicted of orchestrating Rulon Orid's murder and sentenced to life in prison. He dies of a heart attack in 1981, but his influence continues. He leaves behind a hit list of dozens of names in a document called the Book of the New Covenants. His children and wives continue carrying out murders into the 1990s, killing at least 4 more people. It takes years for authorities to dismantle the network of violence Orville created. Credonia Morindi and Joseph Kibwetir. The movement for the restoration of the 10 Commandments of God emerges in Uganda in the late 1980s. Joseph Kibwetir, a former Catholic politician, teams with Credonia Morinda, a former prostitute who claims the Virgin Mary speaks through her. They preach that the world will end on December 31, 1999. And only their faithful will ascend to heaven. Followers surrender all possessions to the movement and observe strict rules: no sex, no soap, no conversation except on Fridays, and only 1 meal per day. Children are separated from parents. Members wear identical clothing and work long hours farming movement property. Mirend enforces discipline brutally, beating violators and locking them in rooms for days. When January 1, 2000 arrives without apocalypse, leaders announce a calculation error and reschedule Judgment Day for March 17. On that morning, leaders gather several hundred followers into a church compound in Kanungu. They seal the windows and doors. Explosives and accelerants placed throughout the building ignite. The church becomes an inferno. 530 people burn to death. Investigators initially believe it's mass suicide. Days later, they discover mass graves on movement properties containing hundreds more bodies. The total death toll reaches at least 778, making it one of Africa's worst cult massacres. Many victims show signs of strangulation or poisoning before burial. Kibwetir and Miranda's bodies are never conclusively identified, and some investigators believe they escaped and remain at large. The Ugandan tragedy reveals how apocalyptic prophecies in regions with limited government oversight can escalate to genocide, scale killing. Jeffrey Lundgren. Jeffrey Don Lundgren grows up in the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a mainstream Mormon offshoot. He becomes a lay minister and guide at the Kirtland Temple in Ohio. Behind his religious facade, Lundgren is embezzling church funds and developing heretical teachings that blend Mormonism with his own apocalyptic visions. Lundgren convinces about 20 followers that he's a prophet and that they must prepare for Christ's imminent return to the Kirtland Temple. He demands complete obedience and begins sexually abusing women in the group. Followers turn over their paychecks and possessions. Lundgren uses the money to buy weapons and maintain his own comfortable lifestyle while his followers live in poverty. In 1989, Lundgren decides the Avery family, Dennis, Cheryl, and their 3 daughters, are unworthy and must be sacrificed for the group to achieve salvation. Over 2 days in April, Lundgren and his top followers execute the family one by one. They bind and tape each victim before shooting them and throwing them into a pit in a barn. The youngest victim is 6 years old. Lundgren flees to California with his followers, but investigators track them down in 1990 after an anonymous tip. He's convicted and sentenced to death. He shows no remorse, claiming God ordered the killings. Lundgren is executed by lethal injection in Ohio in 2006. Several followers receive prison sentences ranging from 7 years to life. His case illustrates how quickly a local religious teacher can descend into murderous delusion when followers grant absolute authority. Adolfo Constanzo. Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo grows up in Miami and Puerto Rico, introduced to Santeria and Palo Mayom by his mother. These Afro-Caribbean religions involve animal sacrifice and spirit possession. Constanzo twists these traditions into something monstrous, combining them with Aztec human sacrifice mythology and drug cartel violence. By the 1980s, Constanzo works as a fortune teller in Mexico City, attracting clients from powerful drug trafficking families. He convinces them his rituals will make them invisible to police and bullets. His cult grows to include corrupt police officers, drug dealers, and wealthy believers. Constanzo calls his operation a magical protection service and charges enormous fees. The rituals grow darker. Constanzo begins demanding human sacrifice, claiming it makes his magic stronger. His followers kidnap victims, including homeless people and rival drug dealers. In March 1989, they abduct Mark Kilroy, an American college student on spring break in Matamoros. Kilroy is tortured and murdered, his brain removed and boiled in a ritual pot. When Kilroy's disappearance triggers an international investigation, Mexican police discover a ranch containing a shed filled with human remains, ritual cauldrons, and occult paraphernalia. 15 bodies are found dismembered and mutilated. Constanzo flees to Mexico City. During a shootout with police in May 1989, he orders his lover to shoot him rather than face capture. He dies at age 26. His case terrorizes the border region and demonstrates how occult beliefs can merge with organized crime to produce sadistic violence. Anne Hamilton, Barron. Born Evelyn Grace Victoria Edwards in Australia in 1921, she reinvents herself as Anne Hamilton, Byrne, claiming to be the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. In the 1960s, she attracts followers from Melbourne's middle and upper classes, including doctors, nurses, and professionals. She forms the family, officially known as Santiniketan Park Association, blending yoga, Christianity, and New Age beliefs. Hamilton, Byrne's most horrific practice involves children. She and her followers collect children through adoption, custody agreements, and questionable legal means, some possibly kidnapped. She gathers 28 children total. bleaching their hair blonde and dressing them identically, claiming they're all her biological children. In reality, she gives birth to none of them. The children live in brutal conditions at a rural property called Kai Loma. They're beaten with sticks, starved as punishment, and given LSD from as young as age 10 as part of their initiation. Hamilton Byrne calls this enlightenment training. The children are isolated from the outside world, homeschooled, and told their adoptive parents are their real parents. Former members report being locked in dark rooms for days and force-fed medications. In 1987, one girl escapes and reports the abuse to police. Investigations reveal decades of child abuse and fraud. Hamilton Byrne flees Australia, but is arrested in 1993 and extradited. She receives only fines and no jail time due to legal complications and her declining mental health. She dies in 2019 at age 98, having never shown remorse. The family exposed how cults can operate in plain sight within prosperous Western countries, hidden behind respectable facades. Thériault. Moses Thériault forms the Anthill Kids Commune in Quebec in the 1970s, preaching that the apocalypse will arrive in February 1979. He convinces followers to retreat to rural isolation to survive. When the world doesn't end, Thériault maintains control through increasingly brutal violence, transforming from prophet to sadistic dictator. Thériault forces his followers, primarily women and children, to perform degrading acts for his amusement. Punishments include beatings with belts and hammers, being hung from hooks, and forced fights where followers must injure each other. He performs amateur surgeries without anesthesia, using crude tools to remove teeth, amputate limbs, and operate on internal organs. Several followers die from these procedures. In 1988, Thériault performs a surgery on follower Solange Boilet, believing she has stomach problems. He slices open her abdomen with a kitchen knife, removes part of her intestines, and sews her back up. She dies in agony. He forces the group to dismember her body. This murder finally breaks the group's silence. Another member, Gabrielle Lavallee, escapes after Thériault amputates her arm with a meat cleaver. Lavallee's testimony leads to Thériault's arrest in 1989. He's convicted of second-degree murder and receives life in prison. In 2011, his cellmate murders him with a shiv, stabbing him 16 times. His commune survived a decade through pure terror, demonstrating that isolation allows even small-scale cult leaders to exercise absolute power over their followers. Yahweh Ben Yahweh. Hulon Mitchell Jr. grows up in Oklahoma, the son of a Pentecostal preacher. In the 1970s, he moves to Florida and reinvents himself as Yahweh Ben Yahweh, God Son of God in Hebrew. He founds the Nation of Yahweh, a black Hebrew Israelite sect, teaching that black people are the true Jews and that white people are devils who must be destroyed. Yahweh Ben Yahweh attracts thousands of followers in Miami and other cities, building a multi-million-dollar empire through real estate, businesses, and donations. Followers wear white robes and worship Yahweh as God in human form. He lives in luxury while his followers work without pay in his businesses. Former members report physical abuse, forced labor, and strict authoritarian control over every aspect of their lives. In the mid-1980s, Yahweh creates the Brotherhood, an inner circle tasked with killing white people and defectors to prove their loyalty. Members must bring back a severed ear or body part as proof. At least 14 murders are connected to the group between 1981 and 1990, including the beheading of a follower who tried to leave. Victims include random white people killed to fulfill initiation requirements. Federal investigators charge Yahweh and 16 followers with racketeering and conspiracy to commit murder in 1990. Prosecutors reveal that Yahweh ordered hits like a mob boss, maintaining deniability through intermediaries. He's convicted in 1992 and sentenced to 18 years. Released in 2001, he lives quietly in Florida until his death in 2007. The Nation of Yahweh continues in diminished form, rebranded to distance itself from the violence. These 15 leaders span continents, decades, and ideologies, yet patterns emerge. Each claimed special knowledge or divine authority that placed them above moral law. Each isolated followers physically, psychologically, or both. Each escalated control gradually, first demanding money or loyalty, eventually demanding lives. The death tolls are staggering: over 900 at Johnstown, hundreds in Uganda, dozens in France and Switzerland. But numbers don't capture the full horror. These cults destroyed families, stole childhoods, and left survivors with trauma that lasts lifetimes. Children were especially vulnerable, beaten, drugged, sexually abused, or murdered by adults who claimed to be saving their souls. What makes someone follow a cult leader? Experts point to basic human needs: belonging, purpose, certainty in uncertain times. The leaders profiled here exploited those needs ruthlessly. They offered community to the lonely, answers to the confused, and family to the abandoned. Once followers committed publicly, sunk costs and cognitive dissonance made leaving nearly impossible. Add physical isolation, sleep deprivation, and us versus them ideology, and rational people become capable of unthinkable acts. The warning signs are now well documented. Leaders who demand unquestioning obedience, groups that separate members from outside influences, organizations that punish doubt or questions, ideologies that dehumanize outsiders or justify violence. Yet cults continue emerging in new forms: internet-based communities, wellness circles, political movements, and conspiracy theory networks all show cult-like dynamics. These stories aren't ancient history. Many survivors are still alive, still healing. Some of these organizations still operate under new leadership or different names. The human vulnerabilities these predators exploited remain unchanged. Understanding how these movements gained power isn't about satisfying dark curiosity. It's about recognizing manipulation before it's too late. The people who died in these cults weren't weak or stupid. They were teachers, engineers, mothers, students. They believed they were joining something meaningful. That's the final horror. That ordinary human hope, when captured by a malignant narcissist with messianic delusions, can end in mass graves and burning compounds. Comment below your city, so I know where in the world you're watching from. And tell me which dark chapter of history I should cover next.